Are you struggling to stay consistent in your art practice? Or maybe you feel like your creativity hits a wall and leaves you hanging. What if I told you there are 5 simple but essential habits that could completely transform your creative journey and how you approach your art? In today's episode of Tiny Studio Big Ideas, I'm going to talk about the studio habits that have helped me stay motivated, gotten over my creative blocks, and has been essential in helping me grow as an artist. And as you listen to these 5 essential habits, you might be thinking, well, big deal, right? When you build some basic foundational habits in your tiny little studio, not only does it create more freedom in your artistic practice and in who you are, but it offers more space for your creativity. So let's get right into it. Habit number 1, create a dedicated workspace. So this is what I call your tiny little studio. It is the space where you allow yourself to connect with that inner creative flow. So let's talk about the space, the actual physical space of your tiny little studio. Let's say, that you don't have a studio space at all. What do you do? Your studio space is, in fact, wherever you decide that you are going to create. It can be the corner of your kitchen table. It can be a tiny little room like what I have here. It can be a spot in your living room or even in a closet. Some people have larger closets, empty it out and just make their own tiny little studio in there. Some place where you can go and focus your energy. And if it's around other people, if you've got family members around, you may have to work around your time to make it more effective for you. Or one of the best ideas that I have tried in the past before I had this space here was simply my headphones, and I would put on a hat, a baseball hat, which was the input, the spark for me to come into a focused state of being, even though there were others around me. So your tiny little studio can simply be a small space anywhere in your home. Perhaps you have a garage that you can go out to, or maybe even an outer space in an art community where you can share a studio space with somebody else. There are many, many different options. The key is to find that space, to establish the space, and to hold to it, meaning you come to it daily and begin to build your energy around that space. So let's say you don't have a tiny little studio, someplace where you can set up and close the door and just be you and your creativity, and you have to share space with family members. One thing that you can do is pick an area where you know that certain times during the day it's going to be relatively yours. You're going to have your privacy. And in that space, you can set up your easel, maybe a little table, and have a few storage boxes that you can put your artwork in. You can put your paints in, your turpentine or mineral spirits, whatever you're using, your brushes, your canvases. And you really don't need a lot of room for that. Have just the basics, the absolute necessities in that area. And then once you have established that space, you can embellish it with perhaps a plant or some photographs of people you love. You can do all sorts of things like that. Whatever helps you feel comfortable and warm and fuzzy and loved, you have to kind of focus on those deeper and more subtle feelings as you develop your artistic space. Some of you don't need that kind of thing. You just set up an easel and there you go. Others need to work the area, need to connect somehow to that little tiny space, your little tiny studio, in a personal way to help you focus, settle down, let go of the tugs and pulls of the day, and begin to focus on your creative journey for that specific time frame that you are in your tiny little studio. The second habit is to establish consistent hours. So you want to have specific times that you move into your tiny studio space. It can be every day for an hour. It can be maybe 3 times a week where you can spend more time in the studio. Or maybe you just dedicate your weekends to creativity and being in that studio space to learn more about who you are as an artist. When you have consistent hours and you basically stick to those hours, you are developing and building discipline in that creative space, in that studio space. You are creating the walls and the ground, the foundation of a creative practice. You know, we all need a home to live in. And if we haven't got the foundation, the walls, the windows, the doors, the roof, we haven't really got a space to live in. Think of your creative energy as needing that space within you. Part of building that space is being consistent with your time in the studio. Artists who are successful do not sit around and wait for inspiration to strike. They simply move into their studio space at the designated times that they have created or that are available to them, and they paint, they create, they are there. But what if you walk into your studio and you just don't feel like painting? You don't want to create anything. You're just in one of those moods. Wouldn't it be easier to just push it aside, go do something else, and then come back later? No, I highly suggest that you go into your studio for that specific time and do something else. You don't want to paint? Don't paint. If you're having a bad day, come into your studio space, pull out your journal, write, maybe even just bring a book and read a book. You can even just sit there and look at some of your artwork, tidy up a little bit, just kind of fix things up, but spend time in that studio space during the hours that you have specified for your creative journey. This alone will help you greatly, especially those of us who are a little bit distracted and can easily slip off and go off and do other things. It's very important to establish the routine of your creativity. The third habit is to keep your tiny little studio clean and organized. You know how they say if you've got a clear space, your mind is clear as well. You're able to dive right into the creative act or whatever it is that you're going to be working on that day in your tiny little studio without the distractions of stuff piled everywhere. So whether you come into the studio, take 5 minutes to put everything away, to organize, but even better, before you get out of your studio at the end of your specified time, clean up. Have it ready for next time you come in. Even if you still have your paints out, you're not finished with the painting. I'm not saying clean off your palette and put it away. If you know you're going to be back the next day with oil paints, that is. If you're using acrylics, you're going to want to clean off your palette beforehand. But wash your brushes, put them away, have them ready for your next studio session. It just reduces that whole feeling of overwhelm. When I walk into my studio and there's stuff everywhere, because it's such a small space, I immediately just want to close the door and leave. I don't want to engage. It's as if there's no room for my creativity to flow freely. I must have a clean, organized space. And I'm not at all one of those hyper organized people, those hyper clean type of people. I'm not. I'm very average. I'm, in fact, quite messy. I'm, in fact, quite messy. But in my studio space, I have learned over the years that when things are tidy and clean, I have much greater access to my creative energy. There's just more focus. There's more openness. There's more of that connection between what I'm doing in my studio, how I'm mixing my colors, from the tip of my brush to the space between my canvas. All of that I become connected rather to all of those things when my studio is clean, when it's cleared of all the junk and rubble and and clutter. Cluttered space, cluttered mind. That has been a very powerful understanding in my own personal life. So I am adamant about keeping my studio clean when I'm coming in to paint or when I'm coming in to write or draw. Whatever it is that I'm doing, I need to have a clear space. Number 4, embrace your failures. So, this is about expanding beyond your comfort zone. When you come into your tiny little studio, wherever that is, you need to give yourself permission to mess up. You need to give yourself permission to completely fail. And it is only through this pathway that you will, in fact, grow as an artist. You need to give yourself the permission to fail, to do an average job, to not create fabulous artworks. All you are doing in your tiny little studio is connecting with yourself in that moment, connecting with your creative energy in that moment, and working with it so that you can better understand how you flow as an artist, how you work, the areas that you need to improve. When you are connected to that creativity and when you allow yourself to fail, to push beyond your comfort zone, to try new things, try new mediums, try a concept that you have never done before, maybe in your composition, the way you're going to design your painting, and just do it. Not worried about if it's going to work or not. When you are in your studio space, you are, in fact, in that space of quote unquote failure. I say the word failure because it is a word that we are all afraid of, and it shouldn't be. When we fail, we learn. When we fail again, we learn better. And when we continue to fail, we become masters of our art. And that is such a joy to embrace. And it took me way too long to even get to a place where I was able to let go of my ego enough to begin to push beyond my comfort zone, to learn things that I never thought that I would embrace, and has brought me much faster than everything else that I have done in my life to an inner state of being comfortable with my mess ups, being comfortable with who I am right now in this moment, with all the mess ups, with all the failures, with all the good things as well. You don't take a failure that you had in your studio and bash yourself over the head with it. That's not it. No. Being open and accepting of the things that don't work in your studio practice just gives you the foundation to love yourself even more, because when you are in touch with the things that don't go well in your life or in your artistic creations or in your tiny little studio, that is when you are able to begin to open up to that authentic, creative love that we all need to get to. It is, I think, in my philosophy, one of the highest goals that I can reach towards in my life. I don't know that I'll ever get there, but that is what I'm reaching towards. And, as a little side note, my artistic journey here in this tiny little studio is reaching towards mastery in my in my artwork. I may never get there. I may get pretty far, but I might not really get beyond where I am today. The purpose of that focus is not to reach that goal, but to be connected to the journey, to every day, every specified hour in my tiny little studio where I can come back to who I am, who Vida is in this creative space, and the thoughts that are coming through me, the openings and the realizations of what I need to learn, what I'm not very good at, and how can I get better at them. And it's a joy and it's a gift. So, number 4 is one of the strongest things, and I would easily claim that as the secret weapon to my studio practice, is being open to failures, because it may be one of the strongest, most powerful areas, and it's dynamic and exciting. But number 5 is a habit that really doesn't have a lot of oomph behind it. But in the end, it is, in fact, the most powerful of these 5 habits. And that is taking the time once a week to reflect on what you have done the week before and set goals for the week to come. I do it on a weekly basis. Some others may, do a bi-weekly thing or maybe even once a month. But being the distracted type of person that I am, I need to do it each week. And Sundays is my day to do that. So what does that mean? When I come into the studio at the end of the week and look at what I have done, sometimes what I have not done, but when I come in and look at what I have done, let's say a painting that I have been working on, I will come in and with my notebook, because I like to write things down on paper, I will write down what I did, the paints that I use, because I forget what I have used, the materials I use, and the stage of the painting that I'm in. Because if I put a painting aside and then pull it up a few months later, the details are kind of gone from my mind. So I write all of it down very quickly. And then I look at my painting and I notice what went well in that painting and what needs more work. I look at how I might want to develop a certain area of my painting and how I might actually do that. So it's reflecting, it's taking the things that I have learned over the years and perhaps in the past week, and I kind of pull it all together and reflect on the lessons that I have learned through my failures over the years and how I might be able to put that forward into this next week on how I might finish the painting, what I might do with this area. What if I changed the color, a certain color, moved it from a warm to a cool? What might that do? How can I pull the design together in a better way to make for a more dynamic painting in the end? All of those things. I spend time doing that. And then I take some time and write out what I intend on doing the following week. What is a small goal that I can move towards in the following week that will help propel me forward as an artist, as a creative being who, in the tiny little studio, is connected to that creative energy within, how I might move forward in my artwork, something that I need to work on. And it is this last step of reflecting and setting goals for the next week that will keep me moving forward and developing much faster than any of the other 5 habits that I practice regularly. So, creating a dedicated workspace and having consistent hours, keeping your workspace, your tiny little studio clean and clutter free, embracing the failures, and taking the time to reflect and set new goals for the following week are the 5 foundational, essential, groundbreaking habits that are going to propel you forward as an artist and just create a safe space for your artistic growth. So that's it for today in Tiny Studio Big Ideas. And next week, we are going to be talking about all of you out there, you artists who are thinking about maybe kind of, but not quite sure if you really want to, starting your own YouTube channel and the benefits that starting that YouTube channel can have for you as an artist. And I also have a YouTube video on these 5 groundbreaking studio habits for you up on my YouTube channel. You might want to go take a look at that. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Thanks for spending this time with me. You can sign up for my newsletter on my website at vitaevenson.com and download your Artistic Odyssey, which is PDF on some of my thought processes of how creativity works through us. Plus, you will get a PDF on studio tips, questions to ask yourself while you are painting, and things to think about as you are creating your artwork. So with that, be inspired, be creative, be you, and I will see you next week.